morning. Hello, everybody. I'm Kimberly Berry, the founder of Being Unnormal. If you don't know by now, Lord knows it's all over my timeline, so you should. No, I'm just kidding. I've been thinking a lot about stigma, and I've been reading a lot lately about a lot of the camps that are breaking out in like the mental health arena. So I was invited to come and talk about stigma on a friend of mine. She does a podcast. We've been on each other's podcasts. She's a great local friend and resource. She invited me to come on and talk to her audience about mental health and stigma. Hello, Elena. Kim, come on and talk about mental health and stigma. And I was really excited because stigma, I can talk about stigma forever. I'm incredibly passionate about stigma, how it's affected me personally, my children, how I see it play out in the community, and how it prevents people from getting mental health needs. I was part of a crisis call yesterday, trying to find resources for somebody who eventually declined because they didn't want to lose their job. And so all of this really prevents care. And one of the things that it was so funny how, you know, how everything just happens for a reason. So things back to back. So, you know, I'm helping my friend go through how to respond to this and kind of walking them through the steps of what happens. And at the same time, a little bit later that day, I'm having a conversation about this stigma presentation that I had given. And a couple of themes really started to come into play. Number one was stigma. Number two was how people misinterpret mental health and mental illness. And three, the cure. Is there a cure? Is there not a cure? And all of those questions in the camps. So I wanted to come on and talk about it. And of course, you know, some people don't agree with me, and that's okay because everybody's entitled to their own opinion. But what I will tell you is that this is my lived experience. And from what I have sought out through experts, not just the ether web, but having experts on my show, like Christine Ribbins-Grimm from the Pritchard Bipolar Institute research program, going and talking to her about cures. Good morning, everybody that's joining. Hello, hello. Oh, sunshine, that's lovely. So first I want to talk about mental health. And what do we talk about, or what do we think about when we think of mental health? I think a lot of people think about mental health overall. When I think of mental health, I do think of emotional or behavioral issues that can be treated and maybe cured through not crisis level interventions. So it's kind of like, to me, there's different realms of mental health. Like there is your physical health, right? You go and you get a checkup, and let's say that you're having some knee pain, or, you know, you're just having some kind of, you know, funky thing. Maybe you're hitting menopause, you're having these hormonal things. So there are things that happen to your body on a physical level. It's not urgent. I mean, it's not life-threatening. You know, you can take care of it. You know, you can work with your provider and take care of whatever that is. You know, let's say you're hitting menopause, and, you know, maybe you take some hormone replacement therapy, or you find something that can help you, you know, manage your symptoms until you're able to treat that. And eventually, yeah, you do see those symptoms go away, and there may be a remission. It may never come back again, right? So when I think of things like these, I think of like depression. Depression to me falls under this mental health scope where it can be treated. Sometimes it just happens one time, you treat it, it goes away, and you're able to stabilize for the rest of your life. It's early intervention is really critical. So it's like going for your checkup, you're going to the therapist, you may need medications, you may not, but you're really treating these acute symptoms, and it's not going to be life-threatening, disabling long-term. So, you know, anxiety may fall under that realm. Postpartum depression may fall under that realm. Things of that nature, just kind of, I don't know, mental health, you know, the things that can set us back, but they don't derail us for life, right? That's kind of when I think of mental health, that's what I really start to think of. Stressors, you know, even PTSD, I would put under mental health, depending if we start talking about complex PTSD, then I would maybe start to slide that under to the mental illness category, right? anything that impacts function is an issue. The severity of how that impacts your function or your daily life. So when I say impacts your function, impacts your daily life. So if I'm depressed, I may have trouble getting out of bed, which could impact my job performance. It's going to impact my interpersonal relationships. If I'm a parent, it's definitely going to impact my parenting. We don't want to think it does, but it does. So it changes who we are. It impacts our function. It takes away our energies. We may have somatic or physical symptoms of that depression, stomach aches, headaches. Fibromyalgia sometimes can fall under people who have chronic depression, right? So we start looking at these physical symptoms too. Now, I had postpartum depression. I went to therapy. I took care of it. I went on a medication. I stabilized. I was good. I haven't had postpartum since. I haven't been pregnant either, but sometimes postpartum can turn into chronic depression and it can become serious, right? So there's a sliding scale, and we know that in our physical health as well. If you have something wrong with your body, let's say that you get injured and you have an injury, let's say you tear your ACL, right, or something to that effect. If you don't go and get it treated and you keep trying to walk on it and you keep re-injuring it, you're making the injury worse. We tell people to sit down on the couch and do what you have to do and go to the doctor, take care of it, right? If this person decides not to listen to that and tough it out, they could be making the injury way worse than the original injury, and the treatment is going to take a lot longer. It's the same when we start thinking about mental health. If we don't treat our anxiety, it will exacerbate over time, and it can cause chronic problems over time if we don't treat it. So mental health maybe is just like an acute injury, perhaps, right? Maybe we can think about it that way, right? To just try to get some gravity, get people thinking about mental health in a new way. Mental illness. Mental illness, I think, is a different beast. And what I see online is a lot of people, there's these camps, this anti-NAMI camp, this anti-mental health, this anti-stop stigma campaign camp from the mental illness side, severe mental illness side. A lot of that is because some of the funding has been taken away for those services for severe mental illness to be put in these stop stigma campaigns. And so they're upset about that because it's taking away critical funding from being able to serve that population. So I understand that. I would be upset too if I'm trying to handle homeless schizophrenia and people are over here saying, oh, stop the stigma, woo, mental health matters. That could maybe make me a little upset too. I get that. I don't want to take anything away from that, but what I see is that pendulum swing to the other side so severely that what happens is then it actually creates the stigma around mental health that we're trying to fight in the first place. And the stigma is coming from within. It's the infighting, right? And we see that in a lot of stigmatized groups, disenfranchised groups. If we look at the African American community, some people are like, you're not brown enough, or you're too dark, or we see this in the gay and lesbian community, oh, you're bisexual, you can't choose, or whatever that looks like, right? So we see this infighting in these disenfranchised groups often. It's not a new concept. But what I'm saying is it matters, because we should let everybody have their own lived experience. Is mental illness severe? Yes. And can it be scary? Absolutely. Can there be really scary situations that happen because of this? Yes. Is that the whole sum of that person? No. My daughter has a bipolar diagnosis, but her diagnosis is just one thing out of many things that make her, and she is special and unique for that. Is there a cure for bipolar? No, not that the science says. The science does not support that, and I support the science. So for me, I see how medications are critical. I see that there are ups and downs and cycles. I see when her brain goes into a storm. I see how her day-to-day functioning is impacted by her mood disorder in various little ways. How she interacts with socially, what she convinces herself she can and can't do, how she prioritizes things, how she feels and reacts to situations. Those all come into play. When you're an unnormal parent and you're parenting a child with mental illness, it's like having cancer. It's like having a really severe cancer. And that cancer goes into remission, but it could come back. It's the same when we think about things like schizophrenia, psychosis, bipolar, and things on the mood disorder spectrum. We handle and treat the symptoms for quality of life. But just like Christine said in my season premiere, there is no cure for bipolar, and they have the longest running longitudinal study on bipolar. It's their culmination of their life's work. They have all the resources dedicated for this, and they are saying, we wish. But all we can do now is treat symptoms and try to continue to discover how this is happening, where this is happening in the body. What is the science around this? How can we prevent this? How do we know it's coming? And thank God for that. Thank God for research and breakthroughs. I know from, again, our life, without medication, life would be very scary and dangerous, and it was. So I'm a huge proponent of that. I'm a huge proponent of finding your cocktail and knowing how long that takes, right? So it does matter when we think about mental health, we think about mental illness, all of it matters. Everything matters. Everybody's lived experience matters, right? How we approach them also matters. Can we approach it with love, compassion, knowledge, understanding, education? Not what you read on, some weird blog site, or you're trying to treat it holistically. That's great. And your symptoms may be abating right now. That's fantastic. But we also have to, when we do that, we minimize some of the mental illness pieces, the things that, again, get managed but don't necessarily go away because there's a biological issue there. There's a storm in the brain. We don't expect anybody to just get rid of epilepsy overnight, right? But yet we expect people to do that with schizophrenia because it's inconvenient for us to have to deal with that behavior in our world, right? We used to send these people away. We used to think they were possessed by the devil and we'd send them away. And so we, as society, didn't have to deal with this. Now we do. And because we have our homeless population rising, and I did a wonderful episode on mental illness and the homeless population, we see this homeless population rising because these people are unable to be able to afford housing or treatment. They're living on the streets. And so now the rest of us in society have to learn how to adapt these special needs people. And that's what they are. They're special needs people. I don't care if they're addicted to drugs. That's called self-medicating when you have mental illness. So I want everybody to think about this differently. How do we change the narrative? How do we, mental health or mental illness, it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter which category you want to put yourself in. We treat the symptoms so your function, your daily life becomes better. Quality of life, that's it. And if you're struggling, it's okay. It is okay to seek help. You would do it if if you sprung your ankle, if you broke your bone, if you found a cyst or a tumor, you'd go to the doctor. If you're having chronic panic attacks, and if you're not eating and sleeping because of those, that's a problem. And it's okay to get help. It doesn't matter if you want to call it mental illness, it doesn't matter if you want to call it mental health, So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there. Again, this is just one girl's opinion, but really what is so important to know is that we have to take the stigma out of all of it, regardless, mental illness and mental health. And that comes through exposure, education, and empowerment. Exposure, education, empowerment. And that is my mission statement, has been from the beginning. Expose our limiting beliefs and bias about mental health, educate people on the truth of mental health, not just what we read in a Facebook group that somebody thought would be a great idea to spew, which could be highly inaccurate and sometimes dangerous. I've seen some really scary stuff out there. And empower ourselves to form our own educated opinions about mental health. And if we are impacted by mental health in ourselves or in a loved one, then we can initiate those conversations and be able to be a support system for that person without accidentally having a lot of these microaggressions we see towards the mental health community, right? So I'm gonna open up. If you have a question, drop it in the chat. I'll answer some questions right now. I've got a few minutes. Let's see here. Yes, Karen. Yeah, my daughter. So my oldest daughter, she has multiple anxiety diagnoses and bipolar 1. And then my youngest daughter, she has ADHD, anxiety, and she's on the mood disorder spectrum. So multiple diagnoses, which means different medications, which means different interventions during escalations, or different things that I have to do to modify my parenting style to adapt to that child. Sometimes I'm successful, sometimes I'm not, but it really takes concerted effort and education on my part to know what those diagnoses really mean. For ADHD, I mean, that's a controversial one. People feel very strongly about it, to medicate, to not medicate, whatever. It's actually considered a neurodevelopment disorder. So this isn't like a behavioral disorder. This is a neurodevelopment disorder. And I see that, especially in my daughter's ability to make executive functioning decisions, to future pace, to focus, to understand consequences. When you have somebody who can't future plan, they also can't understand consequences. So they have problems, and she especially, she has problems. If I say, if you don't do this, the consequence is this, and I lay that out for her, like if you don't take out the trash by 3 p.m., your chores have to be done by 3 p.m. every day. If you don't take out the trash by then, I take away your phone. For an ADHD brain, what they hear is take out the trash, and that's it. They can't step and future pace their life in that manner, especially when they're young. So I have to adapt my style of parenting to try to fit that. Also, doing that though, I'm also trying to teach her consequences too. It's not that I'm not trying to teach her that there are going to be certain consequences for certain behaviors or choices. She does have to learn that, right, as she grows old, but it has to be age appropriate. So that's kind of the balance, is that we have a lot of expectations, especially on these kiddos with ADHD, to really be able to use their executive functioning, be able to future pace, be able to understand consequences. So then when parents come in and they try to punish that child, you didn't take out the trash by 3 p.m. and I told you to take out the trash, and they come in and they try to punish the behavior, and they're not understanding that, they were only able to absorb one out of the multiple steps that you gave them. That becomes Clash of the Titans, right? So you have to choose your battles. You have to understand when you're going to initiate that skill building opportunity. You do have to hold boundaries, but you also have to be flexible and adaptable to meet your child where they're at. And we are not taught as parents, especially children of emotional special needs, we're not taught to adapt our parenting style to meet them where they're at. We, especially children like myself at the 70s and the 60s, we expect the children to listen to us because we were typically brought up with a more authoritarian parenting style. So it can be really hard for us to adapt and shift gears in that realm. Yes, the cocktail does take time and effort. I can't even tell you, Karen, how long it took. I mean, we were lucky out of the gate. My oldest daughter, she started meds when she was 7, and we started out of the gate, and we found one med. We just had to make it a dosage adjustment, and it worked from age 7 to 12. And we were so lucky. But at age 12 and 13, when she went in, and by the time she was at age 13, she was in full-blown crisis. It took us forever to find that cocktail. I mean, and there were side effects from this med and this med. I mean, like, we went through the gamut, lots of blood monitoring, having to drag her in and out of the lab, trying this and trying that. And it took months and months and months. It took us about 5 months, I think, to dial in her cocktail. And a lot of people don't have the patience for that, because when you're in it, it sucks. Every day feels like 5 years. It's rough. It totally is. But once we did, man, I tell you, things were locking and loading. I was like, oh, finally, now the therapy can do what it needs to do, because her brain isn't like on fire every moment. And that's what it is. Her brain was on fire. We know, especially for bipolar, it's overactive cell activity in the brain. So it's like your brain is a cell. Just think of it. It's like floating around. Well, when you're having, mania, the cells like boom, 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 constantly, right? So these medications come in and they actually quiet down that cell activity. So that's what it's doing on a biological chemical level. Dr. Choi was on my show back in season 2 talking about this. I mean, he's brilliant, brilliant neuro psychologist, forensic psychologist. He was on my show. It was a 2-parter. It was awesome. So you might want to check that out, those episodes out, Karen. They were really, really cool. Yes, we do basic vitamins too. So not only does she take a cocktail for her psych meds, she also, takes daily vitamins and her omegas too. So we supplement with some of those natural remedies as well. But I also know that without lithium, our life is hell, right? Ta-da! Brain health is super important. Absolutely. And Kara, and a lot of brain health, especially, epilepsy and bipolar are treated with anticonvulsants. So it's affecting the same regions a lot of the times in the brain. That's why we use those medications in both things, because it's same brain activity, same regions. So yeah, it's a good time, right? It took 3 years to find the cocktail. Absolutely. Yeah, it could take a long, long time to find that cocktail, and that's okay. That's okay. Don't give up. And I see a lot of people just give up. And I think as a society now, we're used to a lot of instant gratification. And the problem with that, when we're talking about behavioral health issues, is that it takes a while. We still don't have, as much as we have come forward in the science and the medicine of it, we still have so much more to go. We still have a long ways to go. So they're understanding the brain. They're still learning about the brain. They're still doing studies on the brain. They're understanding, epigenetics more and biomarkers more. And all these things are now starting to come into play. So the science is catching up with brain health, which is fantastic, but it's still going to take a while. And there's lots of different reasons for that. A lot of people, and, I was talking about the book this morning. I woke up and I had that clearly in my head. And one of the things, one of the chapters I'm going to be writing about in the book is the things that people told me to do. And I'm glad I didn't do them. And a lot of that would have been just forcing my daughter to do whatever I needed her to do, and to just give up. Like, after a couple months, they're like, oh, already? She's still, wow, that's taking such a long time. Well, no shit. I'm in it, and it is taking a long time. However, I can't give up and I can't stop. And I think a lot of people do. They get so discouraged and so disheartened, and they're struggling, and it's so easy to just throw up your hands. And I think where people, that are struggling themselves with mental health or mental illness, whatever you want to call it, I'm just calling it mental health for now, they'll start to self-medicate because it's easier. And then we see really high rates of addiction co-occurring with a lot of mental illnesses. We see high addiction rates in that, because it's easier to pick up and cheaper, don't get me started on that, to pick up a bottle of alcohol in a lot of instances. And I know I see that throughout my own family. It was much cheaper to pick up a bottle of alcohol or to do a drug than it was to address the issues and treat the issues. So really, really difficult. Hello, everybody. If you have a question, drop it. I'm going to be in here for a couple more minutes. Happy to do a little live Q&A. I love a little live Q&A. Yes, Larry, it really was. People thought epilepsy was possession of the devil. And I was actually listening, I can't remember the doctor's name, but they were talking about the evolution of psychology. And when they really started to understand that epilepsy actually was a brainstorm and not demonic possession, doctors actually made a choice to give some division and leeway to the church to treat some of this mental stuff, because they didn't know how to deal with it. They were focused on the body. And that was kind of how some of those divides started and those chasms started to create, because it was intentional, because the doctors were not accustomed to, nor did they not understand the psychology of it. So they just thought, okay, well, if something's wrong with you in your head, we'll just let the church deal with that, and we'll just treat the body. So it was actually almost an intentional severing. I'm going to have to go back and look for that, but it was interesting. I was listening to those documentaries, super interesting about how that started to come into play, because the church started to really handle a lot of those issues. But again, we used to just send those people away. Just not my problem. Uncle Bob is crazy, so we're just going to send him away. And we did that up until the 80s, and now, like I said, we as a society have to learn how to adapt and understand everybody on the neurodiversity spectrum, right? All right, everybody. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Go ahead, drop a comment. If you see us on the replay, #replay, let me know you watch. Drop your comments. Let me know what you think. Let's have a conversation, let's have a dialogue, right? Let's just have conversation and dialogue about stigma, about when we don't take care of our health in general, it doesn't go away. It can get worse. And the difference, the difference is really, at the end of the day, there's no difference. If something's wrong, go find help. That's it. End of story. That's it. We need, we need to take care of the symptoms. We need to treat ourselves. We need to be able to function in our lives, have an improved quality of life, whatever that looks like for us, and embrace our unnormal. And I think that's one thing that I've noticed working with families is, and of myself when I first started going through crisis, I just want everything to get back to normal. When are things going to get back to normal, what that normal was before crisis? And that's hence the title of the podcast. It was never going to be that normal again. It was forever changed. And that can be a beautiful thing, right? So I have to embrace my unnormal, and now I love it for the incredibly beautiful dumpster fire that it is at times. And I move forward. And I hope everybody can too. Let's have dialogues about this. Drop comments in the chat. Remember, love, no hate. And I will see you all on the Flippy Floppy. Be on the lookout. Kimberly is beginning her book today. So I'm really excited. I'm really fired up. I knew it was a project in the works for a long time. And now I think I have the direction that I want to go. So stay tuned. And stay tuned, season 4. We have some great episodes coming down the pike. Right now, Narcissism is playing. Elizabeth freaking killed it. We have some personal collaborations this season. OCD, we're going to be talking about FASD and RAD and all these cool acronyms. RAD doesn't mean rad. Reactive attachment disorder, fetal alcohol syndrome, obsessive compulsive disorder. We're talking about a lot of stuff this season. And I'm already starting to tape and schedule season 5. So very excited about what's coming down the pike there. I'm so blessed. Thank you all for listening. If you like what I'm saying here, share it. Go subscribe to my podcast, beingunnormal.com/podcast. I'm on all players, Spotify, iHeartMedia, Apple Podcasts. You can say, hey, Alexa, play Being Unnormal podcast, and it will. And if it doesn't, let me know, because it should. So there you go. I mean, so much fun. Thank you all for the continued support and love. I love you all. All right, go do something awesome. I love you. Bye, everyone. Take care.